Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp of the Limp, and I'm here with In a Dark Wood by Thin Red Line Games. And I've had this one for a minute. I've had it for a minute. I did a pop the top on it. And when it comes to Thin Red Line Games, I always wait. And I hope Fabrizio forgives me for that, but I always take my time with it. I do not review it instantly. I poke at it. I play with it a little bit, and I get into it. And it's because they do such a good job of finally crafting these games that I want to make sure that I do the best job I can to give it a proper review rather than trying to rush something out the door. So I have got it now finally on the table, got the campaign set up. Let's go down to the table. We're going to take a look at the components. Quick example of how the game runs. Well, we're going to do a follow-on video about example of play, but we're going to go over the main components of this game and what sets it apart. And then we'll come back up here for some final thoughts. All right, so here we are down at the table. I've actually got the first campaign set up here for you guys. We'll get into all of this and what I've got set up here in a little bit, but like usual, we're going to kind of eyeball all the components that come with the game first. First up, of course, we got a rule book. And in typical TRL fashion, the rulebook is rather dense. They don't have too many pictures, and it is a lot of small college level text in these things. To be expected, Thin Red Line games are not the easiest ones to play, but they do bring some real excellent gameplay. Rulebook is actually not as big as I would have expected. We're only in the 20s on pages, so it's really not that much. But each of the individual games, because remember there are 4 in this C3 series so far, have their own special rules that kind of get added as well. And don't forget, you can combine all of these, and it would be a monster. It would be a super monster, because this already plays like a monster if you just do the campaign on one map. But if you combined all 4 and you actually played it, it would take you months. I'm telling you, it would be awesome. It'd be super freaking awesome, but it would take you a hot minute. So here's our scenario book. And like I said, each one of these are going to come with a few additional rules there at the beginning that get added into some of the scenarios. Not much, but a little bit does get added, like a little Armageddon roll down here at the bottom. And then we get into our scenarios proper. Each of them will have a selection of scenarios. You see some of these, they all use the same map. There's only one map in this game. And if you're playing some of the scenarios, it's just going to cover a small selection of the map, right? See, it starts getting bigger, starts getting a little bit bigger, you add a little bit more, 4, adding a lot. And then we get into what I've got set up in front of you here. And this is where we've got the whole damn thing all set up. Now, the one thing that I got to give it to them is that they do a good job, because I've experienced this in other games where I had trouble figuring out what units they were talking about. And we do not have that problem within Red Line games. It is easy to understand what units are being referenced and where they go on the board, especially for the NATO setup, because NATO setup is a little bit different in this. A lot of these units, it gives you a specific hex, but then you get to move it within a certain range, just depending. Some are like 10 hexes, some are like 5 hexes. So the setup that you see here in front of you isn't exactly where it's said to be put on there. They're kind of moved around within a certain range. And to help aid with that, we do have a player aid for both NATO and the Soviet forces that list down all the units and who they break down to. And this is very much needed because these games, C3, it is all about that command and control structure. Which HQ is reporting to which, to who's the top, who's the big daddy. And there's representations here of the actual HQs, and then back onto some other player aids. We're going to show them here in a little bit. So it's all the way down from the individual unit here on the board to the lower level HQ, to the next HQ, to the next HQ, all the way up to that top level HQ. And something that they have got to where they've started including this in pretty much all their games is this little example of play. And good grief, I freaking love this, because especially in this game in Darkwood, and I'm assuming all the other C3 series as well, movement is very unusual on how it is done. And they get into the explanation of that, down to actual pictures showing you how many movement points it's going to cost to move into each one of these hexes and why for all those different types of movement. Are you moving by column? Are you moving tactical? Are you moving deployed? You're going to have different varying amounts of movement points depending on your formation, and then it's going to cost so much depending on what road or type of movement that you're in. We'll get into that when we start talking about how the game's played, but it does the rest of the stuff as well. Orders, how orders are disseminated, a little blurb about how combat's going to be played out, how assault, how anti-aircraft fire, even down to, of course, with this being a more modern game, we've got electronic warfare, we've air support, close air support, helicopters, all that good stuff is included in this game. And it talks about how all of that is handled. Lastly, we have a couple of these included, one for each player. And this is where all of our charts and tables are going to be, as it's labeled, charts and tables. And this is something that I like that Thin Red Line does. Instead of using the usual card stock to make player aids, they will have one little booklet that has everything. Here's your terrain effects chart with your movement tables, any modifiers. Here it kind of goes into all the postures. We'll talk about postures here in a little bit. Postures for each one of the individual factions, so NATO, Soviets, bombardment tables, gets into everything, but not just that. Let's flip to the back so I can show you guys. It shows what all these things are. It actually gives you a picture, explains each one of these little things. Here it's talking about changing from different formations to others. And again, we're going to get into that here in just a little bit. But I always like that they include this. This is something that has always got to be included. A picture of the counter with every little point on it explained of what it is, why it is, how it is, and all that other good stuff. And then explanations for all of our different types of admin counters as well. And then for people who don't know it, down here to the unit sizes, because there's front, army, corps, division, brigade, regiment, battalion, troop, goes all the way down. And then what all the little NATO symbols are. All right, so I've zoomed in close for a specific reason, because while we're at this part of the components, I wanted to address one thing that I didn't really like, and that is the colors. Let's back out just a little bit. And what I mean by that is the colors here on the map, and especially the counters. So if we look at some of these, right, the NATO forces are almost spot the hell on right there with the forest here on the map, and they kind of blend in just a little too much for my liking. And especially if you step back from the table a little bit, the NATO forces blend in. Now the German forces, who have this grayish look, they're not as bad, but the US forces are, I mean, almost right there with the forest, and it just makes it a little bit hard to see. And if we look at our terrain effects chart here, it's got all these different colors to signify what it is. Plains, hills, towns, cities, all that good stuff. But, you know, let me make sure I'm not bumping counters. Right? And I hold this down and I'm looking at it, right? Like forest is supposed to be this color, right? But you see the forest is like this neon greenish look. But here it's like this. And I'm like, you know, is that hill 3? Is that this? I think the colors were just a little off on it, and it's a little confusing when I'm looking at it. And that can cause some problems, especially with movement, because movement is going to be affected by type and other stuff that's in the hex. We'll get into that here in just a sec, but I think the colors were just a little off. See, there we've got our small little town, and you see this, it's not horribly off on the town, but it's a little off. And I'm seeing if I've got any city. Yeah, here we go. Here's one. Let's move this counter out of the way and zoom in. Enhance. All right, so city, right there, we got some city, and we put that up next to it. You see the color's not quite right. It's close, but it's not quite right. Honestly, I don't know if it's just changing printers, or they had different production or whatever for the different games. But I mean, it's not bad enough that it's going to make it to where it can't be played by any means. But it does throw it off a little bit. The only real big thing I would have liked to have seen changed is just maybe a different color for the U.S. forces. I understand NATO. U.S. is generally green. Soviets are generally red. I get it. But your green matches your terrain just a little too well. Maybe a darker green or maybe a neon green. I don't know, something to change these up so they don't blend in quite as well with the map would have been preferred. All right, so that's most of the components with the exception of there is a deck of cards that comes with the game. There are action cards and there are event cards, and they are for both sides. And generally, these are just going to throw in some randomness to the game, right? So some modifiers or some confusion gives you a chance to change it up so it's not just smashing two forces against each other. You can pull out some surprises with your decks of cards. Depending on the scenario that you are playing, you will have a selection of these cards that are included as part of the order of battle. And lastly, let's take a look at the counters real quick. Here, for example, is an armored unit for the U.S. forces. And the counters are pretty easy to understand. Here at the top, you have the unit designation. We'll get into that in a little bit. Those two little lines there represent the size. So it's going to have either more lines or it's going to start getting into X's as you go up in size. That little 4 means the cadre rating, amphibious, if it's got a little blue dot. Obviously, whatever symbol for NATO. And then we'll have two numbers, attack and defense. It's just that simple. There's no movement points on here because movement points are going to depend on your engagement level. And something interesting about this game is the backside is not a reduced side. In this, it's going to be a change of posture. Here we see the letters SCR. So what that means is on the back of every counter is going to be its most used posture besides tactical. So the front for every unit is just going to be its base tactical side deployment, right? So think of that as neutral. Every other posture will either have number or letters on it signifying what it is. SCR represents a screen. You'll have things like DEF, that's defense, assault, movement, all the different postures. We'll get into them. But your most used one will be on the back side of your counter. And then if you are in a different posture, there are counters that you will put underneath them to signify what posture they are in. Now, when it comes to actual damage, that is going to be represented by these attrition counters. And depending on the size of the unit will determine how many attrition points it can take before it is destroyed. Generally, you're going to have like 3 to 5 attrition points depending on the size of the unit. And besides that, we do have indirect fire assets. So in this case, we have our artillery, and these numbers are different. So it's not attack and defense. This is their barrage strength. They have a full barrage strength on the left, a reduced barrage strength on the right, and that smaller number in the center is going to be their range. And like all the other counters, they do have a posture there on the back side. S&S for this guy represents shoot and scoot. Now, when it comes to our combat units are generally going to be of the sizes of like brigades and regiments. So 2 stripes or 3 stripes represented, and there are a few smaller ones, the troop company, but most of them are in that brigade or regiment size due to the scale the game's set at. It's a little bit different when we start talking about our HQ counters. They're different than our regular combat units. And these are the important ones because everything kind of revolves around these HQs. They also have their designation here at the top. And just like with the combat units, the way this works is when you're looking at the left, that is their combat formation, and the right is their parent combat formation. And if they have one here at the bottom, that's like the top level. So this one is the 2nd Company. So this one, just to show you, we will be right here. This is Regimental HQ, 2nd Armored Cav, 2nd Armored Cav, and they are subordinate to the U.S. 7th Corps. Now, I'm not going to get long-winded on it, but just understand that when they have this black lettering and a little white underneath it, that means that they can be subordinated to other formations. That is going to apply to both HQs and your combat units, so they can kind of be subordinate to a different level of HQ, but you're always going to have this chain of command from all the way down to the troop, all the way up at some point to your top level HQ. Other numbers on here, cadre rating, its size, regimental there. And then this one's the important one. That is its command range. So that's how far it can reach out and talk to its troops. And the backside is for a moving HQ, which obviously has a reduced command range. This one is only 3. Generally, it's going to be half the distance whenever they are in movement. If they are deployed, you're going to see the orange side out. That means they're set up, they're ready to do what they're doing. Soviets, they're all kind of deployed, so their HQs are all set to move. We also have helicopter units in the game. Like I was saying, these will be represented on map by actual unit counters. There are air points that represent close air support, but you don't have actual counters that you're going to be putting on the board for those. And similar to what we were talking about with like artillery, so you see they have a range they can be used at, and they do have 2 deployment styles. FARP is specific to helicopter units. All right, so when it comes to the game, our sequence of play is weathers phase, event phase, air points phase. Side 1 is going to do these things, and then side 2 is going to do these things. And when it comes to this game, your movement phase, that's where you're going to move and do combat and that stuff. It's similar to other war games that we played, so I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about this. I'm going to talk about mainly what makes this game different. And what makes this game different, it's all about the orders. So the order reveal, the execution, issue new orders phase. We're going to kind of focus over here so you can understand what all these orders are and issuing them and revealing them and the delay and all this other good stuff. So I've got the player aid for NATO set out here. And you see a whole bunch of counters on here representing a bunch of different things. So here at the top, we've got our time track. Days at the top and hours at the bottom. This is split up into every 3 hours. So each time you move this over, that's representing 3 hours. Obviously at the top, you come back, it's going to a new day. Down below this, we have our command points, engineer points, electronic warfare points, and air points. And I couldn't find where you're supposed to actually keep track of nuclear points, but you do have nuclear points as well. So I just put it on the air track. You do have nuclear points to spend as well, which is super freaking awesome. But for our purposes here, we're mainly going to be paying attention to these command points, because that's really what is setting this game apart. Don't get me wrong, engineer points and electronic warfare points are cool too. Basic gist with these is you have so many of these points and you can issue out, right, an engineer token, for example, using engineer points to do engineer things like mine bridges or fix bridges or put up a ribbon bridge or do stuff like that. Whatever you would expect an engineer to do, that's what these points are used for. They have counters associated with them. They can be assigned to units to gain that bonus. Same with electronic warfare points. They can be spent out the same way to aid your combat forces, and your air points are similar. They can be used for like close air support. Basically, they'll give you modifiers and all that good stuff. But our command points are the big thing we want to focus on here. So what this is kind of representing is that there are command structures from on high, right? So all the way up there at the top to the idiots in the office drinking coffee, thinking they're better than everybody else, all trying to get that magical combat ribbon so they can get promoted. Those tools. So they're going to disseminate their orders down through the ranks to the actual troops who are doing the hooking and jabbing and all the real military work. This game is all about how you get from there to here, all right, all the way down to the bottom. And what you're going to have is you're going to have counters that represent each one of those individual formations, depending on their size. And then you're going to have counters that represent the actual order itself. And I accidentally grabbed a Soviet versus a NATO counter for the orders. So I went ahead and rectified that. So if you look here, right, so here we've got that 2nd Armored Cavalry subordinate to the U.S. 7th Corps. And back of this, it just says HQ. And that's because this part is hidden. And what is going to happen is you will spend points. And the points that you spend are designated by the order that you're going to issue out. So you've got all different types of orders. You can move, you can refit, you can resupply, you can assault, you can defend, right? And all of these different orders are going to cost a set amount of points. They can be issued by a unit, an HQ of a specific size, and they have issue times, okay? Here on the left, that red number is the command points. So that is how many of these are going to be spent to issue that order. So if we were issuing this order, we would spend the 2 points. And for whatever reason, they say to reduce the max command points token along with the current command points token. I never really got that aspect of the game. I'm sure they've got a reason for it because Thin Red Line, is pretty good about making the rules. Their rules are pretty tight. But I would imagine that you would leave the max command points counter at the max level and move down the current one as you issue orders. But regardless, that's how they say do it. So this one costs 2, right? So it costs 2 command points. You issue that down, and it is going to issue out in a set amount of time. This is the green numbers that we see here. So it takes 2 turns or 2 segments here to issue out. And then the deploy time, how long it takes the units to actually do the thing you're telling them to do once they've got the order, is listed here, the right number. So 2 command points to issue it, 2 turns to deploy this order from on high down to the troop level, and then 1 turn for them to actually do the thing you're telling them to do. So what we would do is, let's just say we're here at 00H hour. We would take these 2 tokens, we flip them over, hide them from our enemy, and we put our 2 turns forward. So if we're in turn 00, day 0, H00, we will place it 2 forward. And when we hit this turn, then this gets revealed. So you flip it over. And this is the part about the reveal orders and issue orders phase. Okay, so let's look at our units here. And let's say we are now in that H06 turn, okay? Now, if we were in that turn, that means this order has disseminated down. And there are delays into your orders if your chain of command is not valid. That is going to be determined as you trace your chain of command all the way back up. So you'll have higher level HQs. In the case of this setup, this is the highest level one. We don't actually have the US full 7th Corps counter on the board just yet. So this one is on the board. So next level up. This is issuing it down to here. We are within our chain of command. They have a range of 8 when they are deployed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Boom, we're in range. So they are valid. If it is not valid, it doesn't mean you can't issue the order. It just means it takes 1 turn longer. So you're a little out of range. Now you've got to take and spend an extra turn to get that order out. But we're in range, we're good. So we get to go ahead and issue this order. That means you would either place counters or flip the units to whatever they are doing. Let's say we're going into that defensive thing. I got a bunch of screeners up here. Now, the way you can tell if the order that you're issuing is actually valid for the different units that are doing it is we look at our little posture charts here and we see all the different types of postures they can be in. So row, tactical assault. Down here, we got defense, any combat unit, deployed, and then authorized posture change, right? Rigid defense, active defense, or screen. So that one is valid for these guys to go into. Any different modifiers, or if the order is blocked due to whatever different reasons, it'll all be listed here. Generally speaking, though, anytime you have units that are either engaged or have attrition, or your HQ has attrition or it's out of range, you're going to just be adding more and more time to that. And that kind of signifies the fact that if your HQs are bogged down or your units are bogged down, they're not able to receive those orders as quickly. But if everything was valid, we would place a time token underneath these guys for the turn that they are going to. So if we're in 006, then we're going to be 09 because it takes one turn to issue this. If our HQ up here was not in its deployed fashion, let's say it was a moving fashion, well, now this HQ is out of range, so it's an invalid order. So like I said, in that case, we wouldn't do one turn for deployment. We would add a turn to that. It would be H12. Now I'm just placing one under these guys, or just under this guy, but understand I would place the time token under everyone that I was switching over to that order. And what that's going to signify is that these units are in transition. So they're not in that position yet. They're kind of weakened because they are transitioning from one formation to another. So let's say they're transitioning from tactical to movement, and they want to try to get moving fast into a column formation. That's signifying that they're scooping up all their equipment, loading it up into the Humvees to start driving down the road. Or vice versa. If they're in column formation, now they're reversing it and they're trying to get deployed. Now, once you actually do execute the order that you have issued out, you get to move these back up. So it signifies the fact that that amount of command and control has been used. It's done. It's good. The order's out. So now you've got those command points to spend again. And you can spend these however you wish up to the amount that you have. But this is kind of signifying that you only have a certain amount of command and control, so you can only issue out so many orders for all the different units underneath your command. There's only so much leadership to go around. Also, for whatever reason, if you have something come up and you need to get those command points back sooner, you can cancel an order that you do have on the record track here on the little time track to get these command points back sooner, but obviously the order is not going to be issued out. All right, something else I want to point out real quick is movement and how that's handled in this game, because it's a little different from what we're used to. When it comes to movement, you do not have points actually listed down on the counters. Like I was telling you guys, you're either going to have 0, 6, or 12. And that's going to be determined by the engagement level of your different units. If they are not engaged, they get 12. If they're half engaged, they get 6. Full engaged, 0. And when I say engaged, that is just determining like the level of involvement that unit has with the enemy forces back and forth. Doing things like combat will cause you to become either engaged or half engaged, or if you're bombarded or airstrikes or whatever, combat makes your units become more and more engaged. So you're going to be able to move easier if you're not actively engaged in some type of fighting. But your movement is going to be determined by not only the posture that you're in, right? So if you're in a movement posture, you look at the column. If you're tactical, remember that's neutral. You're looking at the center one. Deployed means you're in some type of like fighting stance, right? So like assault and the like. You're going to be looking here at the deployed column. So the more engaged you are, the more likely you are ready for fighting the enemy, the more movement points it's going to cost to actually move. But you're looking at two things. You're looking at the terrain type and the terrain features. Features for us is just going to be, is there forest there or not? And the type is going to be all the different types. So plain, hills, 1 through 3, town, and city. So the way it's generally going to work with your units when you're moving them is if they're in a movement type of formation posture, then they get the best in the best. So what I mean by that is that they get to pick the best terrain type and the best feature. So what that's signifying is they're set up to move so they can avoid the hills, the trees, the stuff that's going to get in your way, and move much more quickly. They can find the best path as they're going forward. If you're in any other type of formation besides movement, you get the worst and the worst. So terrain type and feature. If there's any forest in there or flood, you're going to count both of them. But if you're in that movement type, the movement type posture, you can ignore forest and you don't have to pay that extra movement cost. Also, obviously, there are a bunch of roads here spread across the map. If you are in either a movement posture or just the base tactical posture, you can use the roads for movement. If you're deployed, you obviously cannot use the roads. You're not going to gain that benefit. It's going to cost you the most period across the board if you were deployed. There are a few different posture types that are listed down as fixed. That means you can't move at all, period. Like artillery, if they are in the bar category, the barrage, they are fixed. They're set up to sling rounds. They're not going to be able to move at all. Same thing with like an HQ that's in its deployed formation. They're fixed. They can't move. So when we're looking at these different hexes, it's going to be one thing if like the hex is completely filled. So like this one has forest completely filling the thing. You're not going to be able to avoid that. But you're going to have hexes like these that have just a little bit of forest in them. If you're in a movement style of formation, you can ignore those forests as you're moving through, and you'll either only pay whatever it is. So if it's a plain or a hill 1 or a hill 2, you'll pay those movement costs as you're moving through, and you don't have to pay for that terrain type, that forest feature that's already in the hex. But like I said, any other type of movement, so even just the tactical, if you're moving through hexes like this, you're going to be counting for those forests in the hex as well. Which, we look here, tactical formation, they, depending, which one is that? So like this unit here, being in tactical formation, it would add that +2 for the forest, but if it was in a movement formation, movement posture, it would not, well, but if it was in a movement posture, it could ignore that forest because part of this hex is not covered by forest. Here, all covered by forest, you have to pay it no matter what. Here, if you're in movement, you get to ignore that terrain feature because you're in a movement posture. When it comes to actually conducting combat against an enemy unit, the amount of movement points you're going to spend is going to depend on the type of combat that you're going to choose, whether it's hasty or a prepared attack against the opponent. Hasty costs half the movement points, but it's got negative modifiers applied to it. Prepared basically means you're preparing for a combat. You're spending more time getting ready so you can have more modifiers going in your direction to succeed at combat. Now, when it comes to combat itself, combat is something we've seen in plenty of other hex and counter style games. Is combat results table based on the final differential that you get on a D10 roll, right? Add together all the modifiers, good, bad, indifferent, and then see what your final modifier is going to be, what that differential is going to be. You roll in that column and apply the results. Now, I'm not skipping past that, but I'm trying to keep this video succinct, which is why, again, I'm focusing on the parts of this game that make it stand out the most, which is obviously its command and control structure, just because that's what this game's all about. The C3, command, control, and I don't know, forget the third one. Command, control, and communication. I had brain fart there. Couldn't think of it for whatever reason. But I'll tell you what, I have got the campaign set up here. So this is just the review to let you know what I think of the game. I'm going to do some final thoughts here in a sec. But if you want to see the game actually played out and some turns going back and forth, tune into my next video on the game. I'm not going to play through the whole campaign, but I am going to move some counters, get a little combat going on, and show you just an example of how this game plays out. Like I said, I've got everything set up here. You can see all the different Soviet forces here in East Germany ready to go, some down here in Czechoslovakia. You get to choose the posture of every unit when you deploy them to the map for the first time. So most of the NATO forces I actually deployed back. I could deploy them farther up, but I was like, I want to use this big river back here as kind of a defensive line. And then I mined a bunch of bridges over here to kind of try to slow them down, but I didn't have enough mines to really make use of it. I think I might move those before, but regardless, tried to make a fallback position here which forces the Soviet forces over here to switch into road movement so they can move up quick enough to actually start getting here. But then they're going to have to take all that time switching all their orders out to assault so they can actually start doing the attack. And I'm hoping I might be able to barrage them a little bit when they're switching over while it slows them down, because there's a buttload of freaking Soviet forces over there and not a whole lot of NATO forces over here to hold them back. And of course, we do have some West German forces. There's a few up here at the top and a few down here at the bottom. But like I said, tune in. I'll give you an example of play of the game. There's just so many moving parts that there's no way I can cover every single aspect in just a single review, that I'm trying to keep a little more succinct. So y'all tune in for that, and I will get into the nitty gritty of how the orders and everything pans out, and the combat aspect of the game as well. But for now, let's go back up to Pretty Me for some final thoughts. All right. We're back from the table, and now we get to talk about Flashpoint Campaigns, the board game. Wait, no, I mean In the Dark Wood. But actually, it really is Flashpoint Campaigns, the board game. Now, if you guys haven't played that digital game, make sure you go check it out. I got a preview of Cold War up, and I've got some tutorial videos for Southern Storm. One of the very, very excellent digital hex and counter games set in the Cold War era. It really is a phenomenal game, but it is really focused on that command and control structure and the delay with orders and how time plays out. And it reminds me so much of this game, because in Flashpoint Campaigns, you will issue orders to all your different units, all the different ones, right? You move them, quick movement, hasty movement, defended positions, assault positions, same type of stuff that we're seeing here. And then you hit play, and both sides have issued their orders, and then it'll play out a segment of time, and that segment of time will have both units interacting with each other based on the orders that they've played out. That's pretty much what we've got going on here. We issue orders. They're delayed over a period of time, depending on the order that's getting issued down, how long it takes to disseminate that order from on high down to the troops below. And then we're basically hitting play and letting the orders play out across the board. It reminds me so much of that digital game, and I like that game. Great. I can't recommend it enough. Flashpoint Campaigns is good. Go get it. Cold War is released in November. Go check it out. Now, here's the thing. Here's the rub. And no offense, Fabrizio, but here's the rub. There is a difference when it comes to a digital game versus a board game. In the digital game, it handles all the bookkeeping, all the back end is handled by the game, so you don't have to worry about it. You're just, I'm issuing orders. This is what I want to do. And here, you've got to handle all of that yourself. And it's the one thing that sets the C3 series apart, but it's also the one thing that I could see holding it back is how the orders are handled. And that's because while I was poking around at this thing, I found myself thinking, why wouldn't I just leave everything in tactical and just play the game out? Because depending on your formation, it's going to give you certain boons or negative modifiers, bonuses, all that stuff. So you're better at certain things depending on your unit's posture. So they'll be better at attacking, or they'll be better at moving, or they'll be better at defending. But then I'm sitting there like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Because there's so much of a delay. And if you get caught by the enemy while you're in that transition period with your units, you get big negative penalties. And I'm like, I could see someone playing this game out and just ignoring that, all the command structure aspect, all the time delays, all that stuff, and just leaving all the units in tactical and then just playing it as it is. You got your attrition points, you got your everything. Like, I'm just going to issue orders. I'm going to move these units. You're going to move your units. We're just going to see what happens. And honestly, I think that's what most people would do. And I think the game would still be good. I think the game would still be good at that. But it's like getting ice cream and not getting the sprinkles, right? You're getting something that's good, but do I want to spend the time getting all the toppings on top? You don't need it. You don't need the chocolate sprinkles. You don't need the hot fudge. Some people are allergic to peanuts. Regardless, you don't need all that to have a nice bowl of ice cream, but does it make it better? Yeah, it does. And I think that's what's going to really make the difference in this game is the order structure and everything that's being done, that back and forth, that keeping track of where the HQs are and are they able to issue the orders out quickly and properly and disseminate it down to the troops on the ground, and what formation, if you're especially able to get your guys in good defensive positions and now you've got them dug in, you can hold off better, and you need those modifiers to hold off against that overwhelming assault. And the Soviets, for example, they get boons when it comes to making a march assault. Some of their units can do that, where it reduces that movement point cost to conduct attacks so they can make better attacks. They have a better chance of doing that prepared attack instead of just having to resort to hasty attacks. It kind of maximizes their assault factor while still keeping them mobile, which is key. The Soviets do need to do that. But like I said, it's the rub of it. And I think that for this game, with all that bookkeeping, all that stuff that's going on behind the scenes, it's only going to appeal to some players, the players who want to maximize it, right? The ones who want that real deep Chromie experience. They're going to be the ones who are going to kind of gravitate to this. But I could see some players who are going to try it and be like, I'm just going to leave everything at tactical because it's so much easier and it takes out a lot of the bookkeeping. And honestly, I think it's fine either way. If you want to play the game that way, it's your game. By all means, go for it. And you know what? I was thinking about it myself. I'm like, if I'm going to play this game, and especially if I was going to play it with multiple of the games put together to play the big monster game, how much more simple it would be just to have, everyone in tactical, not worry about anything else, not have to worry about all the different modifiers, because of course there's just massive amount of modifiers in this game. If this, then that, then this. Sometimes if you're defense, then you have to take attrition, you can't retreat. Is it worth it? And like I said, I do think it's worth it, but it's only going to be worth it to some of us. The ones that look at that huge game with 5,000 counters and go, ooh, I'd like to set that up. I think those players, this is going to appeal to, because the more simulation, the more you get to actually get your hands into it, the more that they're going to like it. But some people will like something that's a little simpler. And maybe that means C3 isn't for you. It doesn't mean that you don't want to try Thin Red Line games. Those players, I would just say, play Under an Iron Sky instead. So yes, ultimately, in a Darkwood, and I'm just going to apply this across the board to the C3 series because they're all like this, right? So one is the others. They just cover different areas and different theaters, and some will have different nations involved. They're all going to play like this. I definitely give it a recommend, but I give it a soft recommend. I think it's only going to be appealing to that hardcore simulation style player, the one that, like I said, doesn't balk at deep rules, the ones who want to maximize, right? The ones who want to really get into it. They don't mind having to go back and forth with all the different postures. And there's a lot of huge list of different postures that the units can be in. And like I said, it's like that bowl of ice cream. It's good on its own, but it's better when you add the toppings. And I think the command structure is the toppings on this. And if you're someone like that you want all the toppings, you want to have everything added that you can possibly get, then yeah, it's definitely a recommend for you. Someone else might be a pass. So when it comes to a Darkwood, I'm going to give it a complicated command structure out of 10. All right, that's going to be it for me. Like I said, you guys stay tuned. I will film a little bit more of this game because I just want to play it. You guys get to benefit from it. But if you want to see how some of the counters moving, how some of the command stuff goes on, tune back in when I have that example play going. All right, that's going to be it for me. Y'all take care. I'll catch you in the next one.